stars be with you.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Energetic Principles Podcast. My name is Melissa LaFera, and I'm an astrologer, tarot consultant, all-around creative from San Diego, California. And today we're going to be talking about the Taurus full moon and the waning period, about approximately 2 weeks that follow it. And so the theme of this broadcast is about releasing prosperity blocks. And prosperity can look has so many forms, right? Immediately we go to money, we go, finances, a sense of wellness, but just living a prosperous life is can be difficult, especially when we find ourselves in situations of stress, whether it's within ourselves or within the outside conditions, because we can't pretend that the world isn't a bit tense, and there's a lot of difficult storylines going on that can keep us from living our best lives. So how do we maintain our autonomy and our personal sense of wellness and peace, and stillness and calm that Taurus can offer us within all the change that is going on? You can hear our sirens going by right now as I start this broadcast. So perhaps that's a sign that even though the sirens are all around us, how do we maintain that ground and that sense of prosperity and abundance within? Now, the exact full moon will happen on Friday, November 15th at 1:28 p.m. Pacific time. And the waning period will go until November 30th, roughly, until we have that Sag new moon. And so let's talk a little bit about the Taurus and Scorpio polarity first, because we're talking about fixed earth and fixed water, right? We have a full moon, we're getting two signs. It's not just one. Of course, we are lit up in the reflection of Taurus, but Scorpio is what is, the backlight, right? Essentially that's what the sun is creating, the awareness that we are getting with the polarity of the Taurus energy. So this is water and earth, which is receptive, and it's more about that attraction and magnetism, and sort of that those underlying intentions of stealth that Scorpio can provide, because it is a Mars-ruled sign. So obviously there's a Mars directive underneath the sun. And I like to think of Scorpio, especially Mars and Scorpio, as sort of the ninja that lurks in the night. What's going on? What is the strategy on the inside? And what are we fixated on? So one of the main things that comes up in my mind is this idea of simplifying and grounding our psychological turmoil so that we can experience some level of healing, especially on the emotional plane, right? Because we're talking about Scorpio energy, which is water. And so there is a very good chance that underlying stress can come to the surface and create sort of this earthquake-like energy, right? It's like when there's so much stress at the concentrated tension of the ground and what is buried, and that pressure needs to release, it can break apart rigidity and move what seems to be immovable. Think about the Taurus being the oxen or the bull, and you're hard pressed to move a bull. A bull can move many things behind it, right? Can pull the cart and stay steady, but like getting a bull to essentially adapt and switch out the energy really fast, the kind of I imagine like a darting energy. That's not really bull territory. But we have Uranus conjunct this full moon, so there is going to be this catalytic disruptive awakening force that comes with it that is essentially about breaking apart. So we need to focus on breaking apart what is rigid, and moving the immovable, right? And really this actually creates a highly productive waning period, because there's a lot of moving parts in the earth realm and our physical realities, our financial realities. And so we can rearrange earth in our material stories through the remainder of the cycle, which is great for production, right? It can be a little squirrely when it comes to maybe financial markets or, the changing prices and resources, whether that goes up or down. So there might be variables there. But when it comes to actually having agency over moving our pieces of our world, yeah, we can get a lot of stuff done. The Taurus full moon also awakens this idea of, we're already talking about prosperity here, but also taking ownership, right? Think about Taurus as I own. And so prosperity, ownership, just the theme of abundance, right? Do you feel abundant? Is it time to upgrade financial security? Or rearrange what has value to you? How resourceful are we being with our time, our energy, our literal, financial resources, what we buy, what we don't buy? And what do we want to buy? Like, what do we want to own? And how do we then procure that by being resourceful? There could also be this sense of what we own actually gets in the way of our transformation. I know personally, I'm a Cancer, so I collect all the little things, and I have been working on my house a lot lately because I realized that I'm carrying all these things that I've owned for so long, and they're old stories, right? So how am I going to transform into this new Mel if I don't get rid of some of the things that I've owned for a long time? So it could be a wonderful period of just cleaning out, what you don't want to have in your possession anymore. And also this idea of, are we owning our talents? We're all born with our own resources and our own gifts. And I know a lot of people have that sense of imposter syndrome, where it's hard to own what it is that you were actually gifted with from the get-go, or something that you've worked so hard to achieve, but there's still that next level of really believing and trusting in your talents. Let's see. Let me get my notes here. I think it's so funny because I've been on Instagram and I keep seeing these ads for get a teleprompter, look like you're not reading your notes, have the AI divert your eyes. And I'm like, I think that's just so funny and so ridiculous. I have notes, people, and I am using them right now. So if I turn my eyes and you're watching this video, it's because I am reading what I have already wrote, and I don't need AI to fix my eyes. So just a little side tangent. Maybe that's my Uranian side coming out here. So my next note says, does something need to change that we have been stubborn about and not taking ownership of, right? So back to this theme of ownership, where maybe we're not owning something about ourselves or our situation, and we've been stubborn, and now we got to be like, you know what, I have been doing this, or I have been on this straight away, and I'm owning it, and I'm willing to change that. And then lastly, there's this idea of feeling into what we feel like owns us. Because, some of us might not realize it, but there's a lot of things that we are owned by, whether we're conscious of it or not. And so we might have that feeling and that awakening of realizing like, oh, this situation has owned me. This collective narrative has owned me. This relationship that I'm in has owned me. This story that I've told myself has owned me. And so how do we break apart from that feeling, right? Of that feeling of being owned by something, so that we can feel more free and liberated and really get that, Uranian quality. So sort of the theme here, right? You think about full moon is about release. It brings to the surface. We see it in its full light. And then as we get into waning energy, we can start to release. So I want to challenge you to release all attitudes that block prosperity and worthiness in your life. Tall order, I know. But, we're at a place where we are able to move some things around and start to get in that storyline. There's also this theme of, an issue of distrust that can come up, right? Because if we don't trust someone or a situation, our peace essentially is going to be disturbed. And that's not to say that you should trust everything and trust everyone. But, where can we create more trust so that we do feel more calm? And if a break needs to happen because trust can't be achieved in that area, then this is the time also to move away from what you're like, I know I'm not really feeling this and I don't think I can trust this. So rather than engaging with that sense of distrust that can bring that, just that tension, just move away from it. It's not, you don't have to trust it. You can divert your energy somewhere else. So let's go ahead and look at the charts, which I probably should have been doing this whole time here. Let's see. Let's get this up here. All right. And so this is the full moon, as you'll see on the screen. We have 24 degrees of Taurus, conjunct Uranus perfectly, right? And we have, so basically what's happening is the moon, so wherever the moon moves light from, as it starts to wax towards the full moon and then starts to wane, this sort of creates just this story of how the energy will flow during the culmination period. And so basically we have this moon that is moving away from a sextile with Saturn. And this is very important, right? Because Saturn stations direct on our full moon. So Saturn, pun intended, I guess, has perfect timing where the Saturn story comes back online and Saturn emerges during this full moon. So Saturnian stories, the Pisces story, that house in your chart is all going to be lit up because Saturn is making itself known again. It's almost like Saturn has been slumbering for a while and now it has awakened. And the moon creates a sextile, which is an opportunity to, work with Saturn's agenda. So basically the moon sextiles Saturn. It opposes the sun here in Scorpio, and then it goes on to conjunct Uranus. So that happens after the awareness of the solar contact. And then it basically sextiles Neptune. So we're bridging the gap of the Saturn-Neptune story, which is a whole thing in itself, which, well, I'm sure Gray, Crawford, and I are going to talk about that in our year ahead for 2025 that we'll be recording here shortly. So stay tuned for more of that information. But then we also have the moon trining Pluto before it moves into Gemini. So we have a lot of these late degree, slow moving planets that are involved in this full moon. So, we are getting big stories, bigger life themes that take a long time to sort of play out, whether it's a long time for it to manifest ahead of us or it's been, a long time part of our story. And not just our story, the collective awareness too, because these are collective planets. So there will be definitely, our personal lives are going to be tied into what's going on in the world. And I know that's kind of a no-brainer, but I'm just going to reinforce that we have to work within a changing society. But luckily, in some way, I like this because these are sextiles, these are trines. I mean, the conjunction to Uranus can be a bit, can go either way, right? You put the moon and Uranus in the same room. They're not necessarily, the comfort of the moon is not crazy about Uranus. But this is a revelatory energy that is about disruption and being a potent catalyst in some way. So evolution is not meant to be comfortable, folks. And I tell myself that every day as, as someone with Uranus on the ascendant. But you can expect, especially with this opposition here, that perhaps the outside world or someone in it directly can oppose you in a way that can be eye-opening and challenges you internally, right? Because once again, we're talking about these are all water and earth signs. So what's happening is it's more on this internal awareness, and we might have to you think about Uranus being sudden, but maybe it's not so sudden because these are slow moving energies that are going to take their time to transition, to initiate, to break apart what's being fixed, right? We're getting all the modalities here. So, take your time with it, but honor the catalyst that comes down because with Saturn, especially stationing direct, we might be, there's two sides of this where there could be ideal forms we want to create in our life, but we have to break apart, what it is that we've already manifested or been holding true to. And it could also be there's senses of our ideals that come crashing down to earth, right? Saturn turns around and is like, oh yeah, you were thinking that, you were dreaming of that. Well, let me tell you otherwise. So maybe you need to rearrange a little bit of your reality to be, to have the reality check. Which can feel limiting, but it can also, once we narrow off what it is that we speculated on, it puts us in a better chance to manifest what is actually right for us, because we're not playing around with ideals that don't really have a chance of or aren't in our best interest, if that makes sense. So now the ruler of this full moon here is this Venus over here in Capricorn. And Venus just moved into Capricorn. I'm recording this November 12th. So she moved in yesterday. And so we're getting us the serious side of Venus, right? This is our Saturn influenced Venus. So she is serious about love and connection. She's serious about initiating new values or boundaries. She's wants to act on her creative inspirations. She has an industrious side to creating beauty in the world. And she also is probably good at organizing justice movements, right? There's a lot of that going on. If you want to see the change in the world, or you don't like the way the world is changing, then this is, especially with Pluto about to move into Aquarius. Where's Pluto? Right here. On November 19th, this is a time to organize. So bringing people together for, around a shared value. This is her specialty. And she also knows that things, she leans into the idea that things take time. Like this is a long game, which is important, because she's one of the main aspects going on here is that she's at the crossroads, basically, of the nodal axis. So she's at what is known as the bendings, when a planet squares the north and south node. And she is at the south bending in particular. So there might be a Venusian storyline that needs to be, that requires release right now, so that we can move forward towards the North Node's evolutionary energy, right? Especially since Venus rules the South Node. So there might be this Libra component, this partnering component, this, justice, fairness, equality component that kind of reaches its low right now. But it can get energized by this Mars story of this independent action and awareness and, this kind of fight energy and defense energy, which really does speak to things like justice movements, because it's like if we're at the lowest of what we consider fair and equal and peaceful and harmony, then how do we use our Mars energy and that Aries energy to really, take initiative and to find inspiration to do what needs to be done in order to realize this long-term Venus agenda. And so once again, we're coming back to the Saturn story, because Saturn is essentially stationing direct and ruling that Venus, right? So Saturn plays a really big piece of this storyline, and it's been retrograde since June of this year. So think about what your Saturn story and what's been percolating underneath since June, because it's emerging here with a soul transition plan, essentially, because that's where our Saturnian lessons are taking place, in this soul's territory, this mutable water of Pisces, and where we are working through ideals and dreams and finding peace with acceptance and letting go and releasing, and also compassion for ourselves and others. And finding grief within that too. This Pisces is not light energy. Even though, it gets the rap of like, oh, I just want to escape from something, or like, I'm just going to, have a drink over here. And then maybe that's why there's this escape vibe, because it, when you feel everything in everyone and just, you're the, the boundless ocean, That's a lot. So, so anyway, Saturn's helping to create form around that. And so if we're having could have the challenging Saturnian lessons, but it's helping to, bring, temper ideals that don't work or that aren't going to work, or fantasies, and then be able to create form around what can, while still being able to dream, but maybe with a little bit more of a realistic tinge. So this is a wonderful time to start putting energy around creative forms, what you want to work towards, what has real meaning for you, especially in this Pisces area of life, because you can really narrow your focus to pursue that agenda. And I might be saying that too, because as I record this, Mercury is squaring Saturn. So that is sort of what's in my face as I'm saying this. But I think that is a part of this story too, is, we're breaking apart things that are limiting, but we're also being realistic by narrowing some things down so that whatever breaks apart we move towards, it's not so all over the place. Which, because there's a lot of possibilities, and I'll go on to talk more about that here in a second. So that's essentially the full moon. So let's carry this on during the waning cycle so we can kind of see where this vibe goes for the next couple weeks before we get to that new moon in Sag. And so what's interesting about this time period, especially from the next day, from the 16th, when we have our Sun-Uranus opposition, where that perfects, through the 18th, so this is like a Saturday through Monday situation, where we have the Sun then is going to trine Neptune. And what's also going on during that period is we have Mercury in Sag making an opposition to Jupiter, who's retrograde in Gemini. So first with this Sun story, and so this, I kind of liken it to a cold plunge. Have you ever done a cold plunge before, where you get into a bath, you get into an ice cold bath and it shocks you, right? You're like, your whole senses and your body comes alive, and can feel excruciating. It can feel not right. But when you get out of the water, your body is tingling and it's incredibly relaxed. All your circulation is flowing. And so there's this idea that our identities are going to take a dip, right, in this cold plunge water. And so we may be getting out of our comfort zones. We'll have to be forced to deal with some restlessness. You're sitting in the bath, you want to pop up, but you can't yet. And then releasing the pent up energy that comes with it. So there is this potential to have breakthrough through discomfort. And which can actually bring us to this sort of spiritual dream zone, or once again to this place of compassion or acceptance, or taking time out to meditate, to be more clear about what is changing and how we're transforming at the tail end of Scorpio season, right? And while this Neptune action is going on with the Sun, we have this Mercury-Jupiter story. And this is going to be the first opposition to Mercury and Jupiter. Because Mercury is going to retrograde, and there will be a video about that coming here later. But what's interesting about these placements is that they're both in detriment and in the signs of each other. So they're in what's known as mutual reception, but through opposition and in places where they're not comfortable. So, we're really focusing on these areas of, kind of Gemini, fact, science, also opinion, and then Sagittarius, which is this bigger picture view, and our belief systems. And so this is a loud aspect. And so probably a lot of people are going to have some things to say. A lot of it you might not be able to trust, right? Where you have Sun Neptune going on. So definitely run things through a filter, because I have a feeling like all types of conspiracies can come up during this time. It'll be a loud Monday here. Actually, probably more the weekend when the moon is in Gemini too. But so, and there's a sense that people might say things, we might say things, and there's this feeling of exile where we distance ourselves from other, or we hear something and we're like, I don't believe that. I don't want to have anything to do with that. Or we say something and people are like, psh, yeah, no. And then they distance themselves in some way. So know that there can be this sort of moving away quality from just what is said and what's communicated. But there's also on another side of this, and that's more like maybe the outside world, but this is a time to brainstorm future potentials for ourselves, right? Because we're pairing it with the Sun Neptune trine. We have this Imagineering quality going on with, sort of this big picture view energy. But we have to be really aware of the fact that what we are thinking about and maybe intuiting or inspired by is probably going to lack details and practicalities. And so it's not like come up with an idea and just run with it. In my mind, if it's something that you've been chewing over for a really long time, then maybe you can make some moves here, but do add a little bit of caution because there's just going to be, like I said, Mercury is going to retrograde through the Sagittarius area of your chart. And light up this whole Gemini story. We have new moons, full moons coming up here. So take your time with what comes up in this area and what you're chewing over, because it's not a one and done story. Like this is, this might actually be a catalytic point that then creates a chain of events that will play out through December. So big day on November 19th when we have Pluto move into Aquarius. And I did a whole episode with Nicholas Polymenakos and Elodie Saint-Angebou about this re-entry. So I definitely recommend watching that, which I think is going to pop up here. Yeah. All right. So you can watch that video or watch it after, you watch this video. If you feel like it, no pressure. But we talk all about this big change because this is massive. And I'm not going to go into it here, but this is a big deal. So, but to play on that just a little bit, when we move a couple days forward to November 21st, we're going to have Sag season start. So we're out of Scorpio territory, and it's an immediate Sun-Pluto sextile, right? So, we can even think back to the end of Libra season and when the sun was squaring Pluto. So this is the next solar hit of Plutonian energy. And it's one that we can work with, right? I feel like this is definitely this empowering moment for the future because we're in Sag. So Sag takes us out of the transition, transformative space of that deep water energy and into what is possible. There's more out there. What do I want to experience? And Pluto empowers us to make moves to be able to get out of our shells and explore what those possibilities look like. It's also a great time probably to get out of comfort zones to connect more with community or collective experiences, especially if you're inspired by something or riled up in some way. This is an opportunity to really join forces and create something. We'll likely see political announcements now for what is coming on the horizon. I know we've already started to see things, especially here in the US, but this definitely feels like some sort of, announcement that will be made. And keep in mind that Sag season this year is colored by this Jupiter in Gemini and Jupiter retrograde in Gemini. And so we're going to have lots of talking heads and outspoken people, right? So take that into consideration. But this is also a time to try on new experiences around new ideas or just ideas that you're playing with. And remember that this kind of experimentation mode has definitely comes with trial and error. So give yourself room for what could possibly go awry and then how you can be adaptable, right? Because this is the mutable energy is all about adaptation. And they say adaptation is the highest form of intelligence, right? So be prepared to adapt as you go through your trial and error. So the next day here on November 22nd, we have Venus in Capricorn being received by Saturn over here in Pisces. So this helps strengthen our Venusian stories I talked about, love relationships, value, our art projects, our organizing our collective movements, etc. And so this is a opportunity to create, maybe with some relationship planning, maybe with some more sober talks that talk about some serious things, but are able to work with that energy. So there feels like there's more of a structure of what the form of a connection might look like. And once again, essentially that's organizing, whether it's we're organizing a one-on-one relationship or we're organizing, a group of people. There is this lovely Venus-Saturn piece that it requires time and patience, right? And so, and even if we can't connect right now, there's more, it doesn't feel as more of a blockage. It feels more of a, okay, I'll bide my time with this and things will come together later. So I like that sort of sobering, that sobering Saturn connection for Venus. All right, so that same day, actually, we have, I'm just going to take it a little further because it'll play out through the weekend. That was Friday, Saturday. We have a last quarter moon in Virgo, which honestly, it's my favorite last quarter of the year. It always happens around this time of year. And to me, this is all about the clean it up last corner. So this is when you get to work and you move the material pieces of your puzzle around. You need to clean out that closet that has been gathering all this stuff forever. Get in there, get rid of it, make room, simplify, purify. There could be a lot of job transitions that go on now. And I mean, that could be a reality for some things as the world's pieces move and shift. And we talk about this disruption quality. There can be these bigger changes that happen. And so, not that I want to predict people being let go, but either way, there's this transitionary energy that's coming around the material world. And so we can work with it. We can choose to work with it. And if something happens that's out of our control, especially since we see this moon Saturn piece here, you work with the obstacle. And so how do you position yourself and get clever, right? How do you fix it? This is very Virgo sort of energy. But we do it because it's in service to the Sagittarius story, right? Which is about this future vision that we're developing for ourselves. And so that future vision, right, it's gonna go through some holds here because on November 25th, I'm just gonna go ahead and go one day further. November 25th, we have Mercury stationing retrograde at 22 degrees of Sagittarius. And so once again, I will do a more in-depth video on this, but our Sag story is getting a rewrite, right? So look at what the Sag area is in your chart and what is ready to be reviewed. And of course, we're going to have our normal Mercury hijinks going on, I'm sure. So definitely vet information that comes in, or, don't believe everything you hear. Don't believe everything you think. There's this turning around that is meant to review. And it can be reviewing things like, what do I believe? Where am I inspired to make changes? Do I need to expand my line of thought or what I think is possible? Or have I expanded so much that I need to kind of pull back a little bit and realize there's too many things, there's too many ideas on my plate, there's too much potential, I can't have it all. And so we might ask ourselves too, is where can moderation do us some good within all this? And I think that's especially the case because here you see at the same time, which it then perfects on November 27th, is this, I guess we're going to feel that. Okay, anyways, we have this Sun-Mars trine going on. And so the Sun-Mars trine that, in fire signs, right? Sag and Leo here. The trine aspect is the last one that Mars makes with the Sun before it goes retrograde, right? Because Mars is going to go retrograde in less than 2 weeks' time at this point. And so this is going to be a little tricky, right? Because Sun Mars, we're motivated. We are ready to go. We're inspired. We're heated up. But we can also be overzealous. And so we have to be careful about shooting too far and then having to go back, right? During the retrograde, or being so sure of the vision or where our heart's at, and we just don't have the right information. We haven't done our internal work yet. And so prepare for a lot of enthusiasm and, spirited positions, maybe a self-centered focus, and that kind of fiery motivation. But give yourself time with it, because this is a story that is just brewing and we don't want to go all in when there's still more to be worked through. So a little temperance, a little Sagittarius temperance could be good. But don't kill the vibe totally. That's not what I'm saying. Like, don't be like, oh, I'm all inspired, but I can't do anything. It's not really about that. It's just really understanding the idea of temperance and self-control to some extent, because as you'll see with our new moon coming up, there's another Saturn aspect. So we'll need that. That same day, we actually have Venus squaring Chiron too. And so we think about Mars story, we think about Venus story. So if we're all hyped up with our individual, mission and plan and what we see, our ability to unite and connect and be on the same page, maybe with our plans, that action energy might get in the way of, being, if we assert ourselves one way, how does that compromise the structure of our relationships? Or do we have to, we have to take the consideration of our relationship structure into our actions. But that just creates tension, because it's like, okay, I'm bound and dutiful to this, but I feel the fire of my inner spirit wants this. And so how do we reconcile that? And that's also why, maybe we need to have a little bit of control here so we don't burn those things down that have meaning to us and that are more a part of our long-term story. So this really brings us to the end of the season. We're in our full end of the the waning territory. And it leads us, we have that very deep Scorpio moon that is going to oppose, Uranus, trine Neptune. It's going to do the same connections that the full moon did, but now in more of this reflective, really spending time internally and having some solitude might be very helpful during these last moments of this lunation cycle, right? Because this lunation cycle was steeped in Scorpio, that intense Scorpio energy, trining Saturn with Mars opposing Pluto. It was a lot. And so we might need this time, especially this weekend, November 28th, Thursday through Friday, where we really sit with that and take stock of how much we have transformed and changed, and what that looks like, and how we bring that into our next story of this mutable energy, right? Because it's a mutable transition cycle. And this is where we're going to begin to really focus on the next vision, and then how we can kind of adapt our lives and our views, our beliefs, and just this to the big picture. But this big picture is up against a square to Saturn. We got Mercury retrograde opposing Jupiter, the ruler of the new moon. We have, this Mars energy still sort of trining going on. We got Venus trining Uranus too. So this is a whole new story that will deserve another video. So we'll definitely stop that here. But you can kind of see what the rest of this cycle is taking on. So let's look at some cards before we go here. First, we're going to look at the tarot correspondences for this full moon in Taurus, but how it will also play out throughout the cycle. Because our overall theme I like to call it the umbrella theme that's sort of hanging over all this energy, is this sense of Five of Roots energy, which is about hardship and lack and feeling like we might be alone or left out in the cold, and what it is we're missing in life. But how can we bring that to the surface so that we can have more abundance and feel more connected and feel like life is more generous than it is, lacking. Now, at the time of the full moon, and sort of the vibe of that we'll be working with is this Four of Leaves energy, which is this intermission. So this is a very meditative time where we might need to take a break, take a breather, lay in our cosmic hammock here, and work on ourselves and learn about other people and even our collective stories by having a moment away from the difficulties or the challenges or what has upset us or where we just need to get clear in our heads and come back to this level space. Because what we're releasing at this time is this 7 of stems energy that is also in this waxing gibbous form, where there might be these fantasies or these ideals or these a part of our imagination that is working against us in some way, or where we might be holding on to certain illusions or that are not, or delusions, that really aren't playing in our favor. And so there's a lot of speculation here. And so we don't want to, we want to move away from what it is that, all the things that we're kind of cooking up in the imagination that are not helpful, right? It's not to say don't imagine and dream, but there is that fantasy element and that illusory element that is not helping situations. And so what we're to move towards is the Death card, which is reaching it's in the disseminating, it's almost the last quarter phase. So this is about really carrying through the transitions that you have been making and like seeing things through. Like, don't get through, don't make half a transition and then be like, oh, well, what about this? Or maybe this could work. It's like, no, see the change through. That's what's important here. Because where the energy takes us to the end of the cycle, the end of the waning cycle, is this last quarter Emperor energy, which I think is very appropriate with, just when you think about politics, we're at the tail end of, who's been in charge, etc. But to take this back to our own lives, this is about having a turning point into how you own your own authority and handle your own power and what you have control over, what you don't, and then being able to, it's really that form and logic where you can have a turning point to be like, okay, well, what are these structures I've created? How is this working for me? How is it not? What needs to be implemented? How can I take control? And what don't I have control over? And I need to release my hands from that. And so it feels empowering, but it's also got sort of a crisis energy to it in a way that things need to be handled and worked through. And we need to have more of a logical reason-based mindset in order to get through it. Because when you go through a lot of death and transition, essentially, you want to have your head in the right place and you want to feel inspired and fired up by your own power to, I don't want to say manipulate your life. That sounds, sure. Like, form it the way that that's within a realistic, reasonable framework. All right, lastly, we're going to talk about some oracle cards because I always think that they paint an interesting picture to add. And so I drew first, not to alarm anyone, but I drew disillusion with chaos. And this can be a very challenging pairing, right? Because when parts of ourselves or our realities break apart, it can feel very chaotic. So expect some disorientation, but stick with it because this is part of the upgrade. Like, you don't want to be the illusion, right? But when you realize something's an illusion, or potentially that disillusion can really set us back, but it gets you to greater authenticity. Sort of like, what breaks apart, it like gets you to the light inside. It takes away the mask. That is the point of authenticity. But to get there, it can feel very chaotic, not only just in your own life, but in the collective too. And then our second pairing here is root, very, very Taurus, and escape, And so this was an interesting pairing too, because part of me feels like it's about finding solace in what grounds you, kind of finding your center and that personal nirvana, right? We all, like, because if we're at peace on the inside, then we can navigate through things that are very, that can be very challenging in the outer world, because we are at one in ourselves. And it also could be about rooting down, an escape route so that you can regain your footing amidst the disillusion and chaos, right? So yeah, whatever kind of works for you there, because we might just need that. And it really plays into that Four of Leaves energy about the intermission too. So find your center, root it down. All right. Well, I don't even know how long I've talked here, so hopefully you're still with me. And if you would like a personal consultation to connect with these energies more, or just to see, we got a lot unfolding, especially in 2025. I do a year ahead consult, which you can sign up for over at energeticprinciples.com. And also, if you liked this video, share it with another person. Subscribe, leave a comment below. Tell me what's going on for you during this full moon in Taurus and sort of these waning energies. And if you resonate with it, or if you don't, or if you have alternative viewpoints to share, I'm always open ear. So definitely comment below. And if you're listening to the audio version of this, leave a review wherever you listen, because it boosts the podcast up in the ranks. Yeah, so I think that's about it. Once again, if you want to find me, energeticprinciples.com, at Energetic Principles on Instagram, where I do little weekly reels now. And yeah, we've got a lot ahead of us here. And take your time with this energy. There's no need to just rocket forward to fixes or what needs to happen, or just ideas that you're like convinced life is going down this path, because we don't know. There's a lot we don't know right now, and uncertainty is a big part of this a big part of this puzzle that we're trying to put together. But rather than living in the frazzledness of uncertainty and how things will merge eventually, it's about finding our peace, finding our calm, finding our center, finding what it takes to evolve and upgrade, to the 2.0 versions, or maybe 5.0. I don't know what 0.0 you're on right now, but we need to be solid and grounded in ourselves. We need to feel prosperous and abundant of what we're capable of and how resourceful we can be in times of change. And let that solidify within you. Let that be your motivating factor that isn't at the whim of uncertainty and restlessness, but is solid in its sense of knowing that whatever is going on right now and however we're all changing and the transitions we're working through, like this is hopefully coming to a place that feels more grounded and prosperous. And maybe that's just my high side looking at it. And if it is, that's cool too. But I've talked your ear off enough, so I'm going to wish you the best of luck out there in this full moon energy. And for the weeks to come, I'll be back with a new moon video before you know it. So take care, everyone. And as always, may the stars be with you.